All right, well, good to see you today. 2 weeks until spring break, that's hard to believe. 2 months from today is graduation. Can you believe that? 32 class days between now and the end of the semester. That's really bizarre to me how fast this all goes. We have a great discussion today. If you would take quiz 23, we're looking at one of my favorite stories in Scripture, Jesus and the leper. And I would like to make the point that cleansing the leper, at least in Matthew, is an adequate response to the teaching on the Sermon on the Mount. In many ways, and we didn't get to speak fully to this on Friday, in many ways, when you work through the Sermon on the Mount, you realize that, hey, my life doesn't measure up to the kind of ethics that Jesus is speaking of in the Sermon on the Mount. If the Sermon on the Mount describes transformed people who are at peace with a holy God, most people on working through that will have the sense that's not exactly where my life is right now. And I wonder if Jesus, in his sovereignty, and if Matthew, in his inspired editorial work, isn't helping us to see that we're all lepers. We all are coming to Jesus. We're all saying, if you're willing, you are able to make me pure. And so I want us to look at that idea and look at this glorious cleansing, Jesus' cleansing of the leper. You can see immediately after the close of the Sermon on the Mount that we have this statement, when he came down from the mountain, great crowds followed him, and behold, a leper came to him and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. A couple of things I find really interesting about that, and let me see if I can pull this up. The man doesn't describe himself as needing to be healed. He describes himself as needing to be cleansed, which I find really interesting. Sorry, it will take me just a second to pull this up for us. Our passage is in Matthew 8. A leprous man came and proskuneoed him. Really interesting word. Usually the word reserved for worship. We're going to see the parallel accounts. He comes proskuneoing Jesus. Lord, if you are willing, if you want to, you are able to make me pure. We get the name Catherine from this word, which means the pure one. If you're willing, you're able to make me pure. And then the text says, having stretched out his hand, he touched him. Now, if you're familiar with leprosy, and we're going to look at some pictures of leprosy, the last thing in the world that happens to a person with leprosy is that someone else would touch them. Leprosy is a deforming disease, and yet Jesus in his compassion touches the man And he says, I am willing. And then I wonder if you have a paper Bible, anyone with a paper Bible, can you read verse 3? I have the ESV here. Be clean. Anyone have a different translation from that? Matthew 8, 3.
The New American Standard Bible says, be cleansed.
So what's the difference between those two translations? Be clean or be cleansed. You can see be clean, be cleansed. What's the difference, Asa?
Clean is a adjective, cleansed is a verb.
Absolutely. Clean, be clean. An adjective is a verb. Let's look at some other translations. Be clean, NIV. NLT, be healed, which maybe that's the intent of this word, but you can see that's our katharizo word, the cleansed word. How about this one, the American Standard, be made clean? What's the difference between be clean and be made clean? Anybody have a high school English? Tara, what's the difference? One's active and the other is passive. Now, what does that mean when we say one's active and the other is passive? What do we mean by that, Tara?
It means that one's being untamed versus the other way is like the subject's doing something.
That's right. And in English, we're told do not use the passive voice, right? Did you have a ninth grade English teacher? If you used the passive voice, she was a kind teacher, but she would mark off if you used the passive voice. In English, we're told not to use the passive voice. We are the only language I know of that does that. Every other language is perfectly happy with the passive voice. And here, look at the parsing at the bottom of the, is it an aorist active imperative, be clean or exist as clean, or is it an aorist passive imperative? And you can see the parsing, it says it's a passive imperative. So are you doing the action of this verb, or are you being acted upon by someone else? And clearly, this is an aorist passive verb, and so as much as I love the ESV, it's my go-to translation. It's the first one I pick up if I'm looking at an English translation. I don't like the fact that they choose to ignore that this is passive. Jesus isn't saying be clean. Be clean is the Sermon on the Mount. You want to exist at peace with God, just don't break the Ten Commandments. And here's the standard. Thoughts count. And if you're angry or you devalue your brother, all of that brings you in judgment of the law. It's no help if someone says, be clean. If you're full of leprosy and someone says, be clean, it's like, that's my problem. But if the statement is be made clean, do you see how glorious that is? Because someone else is doing the action. Someone else is doing the cleansing, and I think we should follow it. Now, in the ESV's case, they do pick up the the passive here, his leprosy was cleansed. It doesn't say he cleansed his own leprosy, so it does pick up the passive, but I wish that we would keep the passive nature, because clearly the verb is a regular verb, katharizo, and this is the aorist passive imperative form. So it says, I'm willing, be made pure. Be made pure by God. When God says, let there be light, God doesn't say to the darkness, just try. Just try to make yourself have light. No, God says, let there be light. And when God says, let there be light, there was light. God saw that the light was good. God separated the light from the darkness. And so here, when he says to this man full of leprosy, be made pure, the idea is be made pure by God. And straightway, his leprosy was made pure. And Jesus says to him, see to it that you say nothing to no one. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. We're going to see leprosy as a debilitating disease. It's, as I understand it, if it's the modern disease that's called Hansen's disease, then this is how it works. To get it, you have to have a vitamin deficiency. I think it's a vitamin A deficiency, but I'm not certain about that. You have to have a vitamin deficiency to get it. It's a bacterium that, if watched very carefully, it isn't that bad. You can live a long time with leprosy. But what it does, that bacterium does, if you're not careful, is it kills the nerves in your body. And so it isn't the leprosy that kills you, at least in my understanding. It's the fact that you lose the ability to feel pain. And so what happens is you lose the ability to blink. And so what's going to happen to your eyes if you lose the ability to blink? Eventually you're going to go blind. Any little part of your body that's susceptible to infection. You know, have you ever done your hair like that and you felt something like you've got a bump or something that's painful and you realize, oh, there's something there, and you go take care of it? Have you ever had that like in your ear or something? Well, we all have that, and you feel that sharp pain and you realize, oh, there's something wrong here, and you go fix it. If you have leprosy, you never feel the pain. And so what happens is you're very susceptible to gangrene and things like that. So any little bit of your body that's susceptible like that will end up being infected. And over time, if you get gangrene, what will happen is those parts of your body will rot and fall off. So your toes, your eyelids, your nose, like you go from being a fairly relative looking person to you've made yourself a monster because you can't feel pain anymore. If you have leprosy today, part of the treatment is you're given a partner, and you have to check each other all the time to make sure that you don't have some kind of issue with this. And if you do that, you can live a long time with leprosy. We're told this man was full of leprosy. So he had been ravaged by this terrible disease. This is what Jesus said. Go see to it that you don't tell anyone anything. So think with me here. If someone's full of leprosy, and there are some pictures, they're shocking pictures. You type in leprosy in Google Images, the pictures that will come up will be gut-wrenching. Do you imagine when Jesus met this man if he were in the ravages of leprosy? Do you imagine Jesus left him in that state, or do you think he healed him? I would think he healed him. What do you find interesting when he says, don't tell anybody what happened? Yeah, it's like, what happened to you? Nothing. Why do you ask? Well, yesterday, people couldn't walk within 18 feet of you because of the reeking, and like your body's different. What happened? Nothing. Nothing happened. I'm no different than I was yesterday. No, you're different. Something's happened. No, nothing's happened. Don't tell anyone. And Jesus does that over and over. He tells the man and his wife with the little girl who died, and the whole city's around crying their eyes out. He heals the little girl and he tells the parents, don't tell anybody. How does that work? You go to Food City with your little girl and she's just dancing along, and what happened? Oh, nothing happened. Nothing happened. She was dead. No, nothing happened. Don't tell. I find this incredible, but Jesus over and over tells healed people, don't tell anybody, when the healing, their transformation, the miracle could be obvious. So what's going on there? We want to be intelligent readers. Why did Jesus say this to this man? But what he does say is this: go offer the gift which Moses commanded for a testimony to them. I want you to do exactly what the Old Testament said to do. And it's listed in Leviticus 14. We're going to look at it. But I want to read the parallel passages. So this is Mark's version. This is Matthew's. Mark's version is in chapter 1. I think it's 44. It's earlier than that. He went out preaching in their synagogues into all of Galilee. And what's interesting, neither Mark nor Luke record the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew, I think, was converted at that sermon. That's why he remembers it so vividly. Mark and Luke do not record it, but they do record Jesus healing this leper. And so as Jesus is preaching and teaching in Galilee, it says this: he went preaching into their synagogues throughout all of Galilee, and he was kicking out demons. And there came to him a leprous man, encouraging him and falling on his knees and saying to him, if you are willing, you are able to make me pure. And then I love this word. It's from the word splanknidzo. Splanknidzo is related to the Greek word splankna. And splankna is what happens if in battle you were cut. Your splankna would be what comes out. This is the word in English, having been gut-wrenched. Jesus didn't just feel pity for this man. he felt pity to the extent that it hurt him in his belly when he thought about the man's position. So this guy comes and says, if you want to, you can make me pure. And when Jesus sees him, it says he was splanchnizomide. His, where would it be? After his inward parts, his viscera, his entrail, like Jesus was torn up on the inside. He felt such pity for this man in his condition. Having been splanchnizomide, having stretched out his hand, he touched him, and he says, I am willing. And I think this is so helpful to us when we think about how the Sermon on the Mount exposes our sin and how we have not lived up to the ethics of heaven. Jesus is never going to say to anyone who comes, oh, you're just in too bad a shape. I can heal good people, but you're just too far gone. Jesus never says that. When people come to Jesus, he is moved with compassion. It hurts him on the inside. He feels such pity for this man. And he always says, I'm willing. Be made pure. And straightway, the leprosy left him, and he was made pure. That's interesting that the ESV both times doesn't translate the imperative as passive, but does translate the made clean. I'd be interested in the committee's logic there. And then 43 it says, and embrymazoing to him. This is a really interesting word. It means in the sense a bellow or snort. So he feels intense compassion for this man in his terrible, but then he angrily orders the man to do something. Having embrymazoed him. This is the same word that's used when Jesus throws demons out. It's a very vivid word. Having, I guess it's embrymazo, to him, straightway he threw him out. And he says to him, see to it that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer concerning your cleansing what things Moses commanded, and do it for, there's no word and, do it for a testimony to them. And having gone out, and you can do this word as but, I'm going to do it as but here. I think it's a mild adversative here. But he, having gone out, began to preach many things and to spread the word, so that Jesus no longer was able openly to go into the city, but he was on the outside in the desert places, and people were coming to him from all around. Now, what do you find interesting about that? Jesus embrymazoed him to go offer the gift that Moses commanded, and the man doesn't do what Jesus commanded him to do. Kelby, what do you find interesting about that?
Why did Jesus get so angry? Is it like he knew that the man would do that, but he felt such pity and compassion on him that he healed him? Like, was it? I mean, I don't know. All I'm thinking was like impulsive, but not in like an impulsive sin, but like, I don't know.
It's confusing, isn't it? On the one hand, Jesus shows great compassion, and almost in the same breath, he seems to be roughly treating this man. Let me ask another question. Was it wrong for this man to disobey Jesus? Absolutely.
So in the NIV version, it says Jesus was indignant in verse 1.
Indignant, yeah.
And then I think in your version it said like
Stern.
something about like passion or something. Compassion.
So whenever you get to something like this and you want to find out what a word means, this is what you do every time. Go to the word and look up every place where that word appears in the Bible. And so what I did is I just looked up every occurrence of the word. Oh my goodness, I just sometimes I'm asking my computer to do too much. Let's just do it this way. I'll float this panel. So these are all the places in the New Testament where embrimao appears. So he embrimazos some blind people. We've got our passage. The disciples, when they criticized Mary Magdalene for having poured out the expensive oil, it says they embrimaoed her. This is when Jesus raises Lazarus. He embrimaoed his own spirit and was greatly troubled. I mean, you can see here, scolded her. This is one of those cases where the word doesn't appear that often. And so scholars differ, warned sternly as an expression of anger and displeasure. Having done that with wrath, censure, scold, to be deeply moved, so John 11:38, on the apparent harshness of the expression, see Matthew Black and Aramaic approach. You can see the related word ferociously, furiously. So I don't know. Terry, you can see the issue, can you not? I mean, it's, this is a difficult word to translate. Is it right for Jesus to be mad at this man not obeying? Why is it right for Jesus to be mad? He told him to do something, and what did he give it? Just given this man. And remember what leprosy is. What did he just given this man? He'd given this man a new lease on life. You would think the proper response is, if Jesus asked me to do something, and he's been this good to me, like, why don't I do that? And the moment you articulate that out loud to yourself, is there a question that comes to mind? The question that comes to my mind, well, like, hasn't Jesus healed me from things? Why don't I do the things Jesus? And I wonder if Jesus in his graciousness isn't helping us to see some of that. The final version of the story is in Luke, and I think it's Luke 12. It came about when he was in one of the cities, behold, a man full of leprosy. So this wasn't someone who had a little leprosy. We're told here that he's full of leprosy. And seeing Jesus falling on his face, so one of the accounts says he worshiped him, another account says he fell on his knees. When we see the full stereo version, he was worshiping, falling on his knees, falling on his face. And it says he pleaded with, he begged, he did everything he could to plead with Jesus and said, Lord, if you want to, you are able to make me pure. And having stretched out his hand, he touched him, saying, I am willing, be made pure. And straightway the leprosy left him, and he, that is Jesus, commanded him to say nothing to no one, but to go, show yourself to the priest, and to offer concerning your purification, just as Moses commanded, for a testimony to them. But rather, word went out about him, and many crowds came together to hear and to be healed from their weaknesses. And straightway Jesus was in the desert places and he was praying. I think part of the reason Jesus is angry because what the man did meant that he couldn't openly go into the cities anymore. And Jesus wanted to openly go into the cities, and he couldn't because this man had chosen to disobey what Jesus had told him to do. All three accounts tell us that the man should have done something. What should he have done? And where could we find that sacrifice?
Leviticus 14,
Leviticus 14.
1 through 32.
The Lord God said to Moses, saying, this will be the Torah, this will be the instruction, this will be the rule of the leprous person in the day of his cleansing. He is to be brought to the priest. So Jesus is healing someone of leprosy, and because Jesus, unlike David or the other kings, Jesus actually read the law. Jesus knew what was supposed to be done. And so he's healing the man of leprosy. And he's saying, look, this is what should happen. Go do this. Go show yourself to the priest. The priest will go outside the camp, and the priest will look, and behold, the plague of leprosy is healed. That's really interesting to me that it calls it the plague of leprosy, the affliction, the infestation is healed. The plague is healed from the leprous man. The priest will command and take, and this is really interesting. I don't think I would quite translate it this way. I mean, it is the word cleanse, so it's that word pure, but the actual form of this word is a really weird form. It's called a hithpael, and you've heard me do enough of these. Who can tell me what a piel is in Hebrew? When you put something in the piel, what does that do to the verb? You remember how we've talked about it intensifies whatever. So if you paint the wall in the call, it's paint, but if you PL paint it, like you're going to get a, paint sprayer 6,000 and you're going to put like 50 gallons, like that's what a PL does. Well, a hithpael is the reflexive binyan, and it means something like the one presenting himself to be cleansed. It's not the one cleansing himself, but it includes that reflexive action. And that's what's going on here. So it is for him who is to be cleansed, but it's more than that. It's the one, this is a reflexive action. It's a hithpael, and hithpaels don't appear everywhere in Hebrew, but it's here. He will take, for the man presenting himself to be cleansed, 2 live, clean birds, and this word is the word pure, wood of cedar, and then this is just crazy. It translates these 2 words as scarlet, and these 2 words appear everywhere in the Hebrew Bible. This means scarlet. This word means scarlet. This word, I'm going to pull it up for you, is the word maggot. And what this refers to is this particular type of worm. When it's crushed, it secretes a red scarlet dye, which people can use to dye things crimson color. This color is everywhere in the tabernacle. And everywhere this word appears, it's this scarlet of the crushed worm. I think the related words maybe I'm wrong about that. I thought it was related to the word abomination, but it's not, that word is not a good thing in the Hebrew Bible. So you take 2 live clean birds, cedar wood, the scarlet of the crushed worm, and hyssop. And the priest will PL command, so he's not just commanding, he'll PL command, and will slaughter the first bird over the vessel of a potter, and then this is really interesting in Hebrew. It's translated fresh water, but what it literally says is living water. So what was Jesus telling this man to do if he had obeyed? What would he have done? He would have gone to the priest would examine, is he cleansed? If he is cleansed, he would go through this ceremony. He would take 2 birds. They would kill one bird in a clay jar, put in cedar wood, this crimson dye, and hyssop, kill the one bird, and it would bleed over the living water. The living bird, he will take her, that's interesting, it's a girl bird, and the tree of cedar and the dye of the worm and the hyssop, and will dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird having been slain over the living water. Now, for my Baptist friends, I think we should always present every person's argument in the best possible light. And if you ask me, make a case for baptism by immersion, I'm going to point out that this word tabal is translated right here with the word dip. And bapto is the root word of baptizo. So they're baptizing the bird in the bloody living water with the scarlet. And so if someone says, I think baptism should be by immersion, you've got a great text right here. And I can say that as a Presbyterian minister who isn't quite convinced of that argument, but I understand. People come to the text and say, look, this is what you should do. And then it says you dip the bird, the living bird, in the water of the bird having been slain. And then it says, and you will sprinkle, let me pull it up here, and he shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who was cleansed, and then he shall present them clean and let the living bird go into the open field. So if you're in a tradition where you don't dip people in the water, what are you going to point out with this part of the verse? So you dip the bird, and that symbolizes our being free and cleansed, go live life. Someone died for you, go live life. That's a beautiful picture, is it not? and then the person cleanse, you sprinkle bloody living water on them. So which one of those is the right way to look at this? You say, well, I can see how people come down on different places. And that's why a lot of churches will say of things like this, it's okay to have an opinion. My opinion very well may be wrong. There seems to be some good evidence for my side. There seems to be some good evidence against my side. The same is true for baptism by immersion. And so for me, I think as Christians we can say, hey, be a Berean, decide for yourself, find the best arguments for everything. You decide what makes sense for you. And I am very comfortable with that. Both of these parts of the picture are beautiful, and I wonder if Jesus, when he inspired this, didn't inspire this to help us be generous with each other and say, well, there are really good people who come down a different way. I'm coming down because of this, but I recognize that there are other ways to look at this as well. Questions about that before we go on? Maybe that's not an issue for you. A lot of people have wondered, worked through that. Then this is what it tells the man to do. I'll just have to summarize. He waits a week, and then he goes through a ceremony, and you may have read it when you did the homework. They kill a lamb, and they put blood 3 places on the man's body. What 3 places is it? His right earlobe, his right thumb, and Kelby, did you have an intelligent reader question?
Why there?
Why there? Would any of you be surprised if I told you that exact ceremony is done to someone else in the Bible? Like the exact same thing, the right ear, the right thumb, and the right big toe? Is there an intelligent reader question you want to ask? Who? It's the priest when he becomes a priest. And I suppose that's everything I hear, everything I do, everywhere I go, maybe something like that. Do you find it interesting that a guy who a week ago was turning into a monster now is going through the exact same ceremony to be a priest?
Okay. Could that also connect to the fact because leprosy is also like a sin, not like we feel like it represents sin at times. So couldn't that mean like once you're baptized into Jesus or like just saved, then you're also called his royal priesthood?
And doesn't the Bible say that perfectly? Isn't before the Levitical priesthood ever started, wasn't the intent for the nation to be a kingdom of priests? And do you find it interesting that the cleansed leper, of course the guy missed that, didn't he? And why did he miss it? Because he disobeyed Jesus. Jesus sternly told him to do it, and he didn't. He knew better than Jesus. I don't know. My prayer is that Jesus would give us the grace to obey what Jesus says to do. I see our time's out. I'll see you on Wednesday.